introduce Chandrachud ji, Shri Chandrachud Ghosh is a multifaceted writer cutting across various disciplines, namely economics, environmental studies, history, and politics. Professionally, he is in the environmental plant science space, consulting and advising industries and companies on the same. Chandrachud ji is also very deeply passionate about and has studied the life of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, along with Anuj Dhar ji, who is another well-known crusader for bringing forth facts about Netaji and other friends. Chandrachud ji formed the pressure group Mission Netaji in 2005 to generate public awareness over the official secrecy on matters related to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Since then, he has been instrumental in bringing thousands of Netaji-related classified documents into the public domain. This endeavor includes research and documentation in many different countries and painstaking uncovering of hitherto forgotten events. He has also authored the book Conundrum, Subhash Chandra Bose's Life After Death. It's available on Amazon, along with Anuj Dhar ji. I pass the baton on to Monica Reddy ji, founder of Aham Talks. Welcome Chandrachud ji, and to set the tone for the talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I welcome everyone on the call today. It is our pleasure and a privilege to host Chandrachud ji today. We look forward, Chandrachud ji, to listening to the truth and nothing but the truth, and that's exactly the objective of Aham Talks. We are striving hard to see that we bring in the truth, the correct and the factual, bona fide information available in the society on socio-economic, political, religious issues. Any issue that is important for this country is what I think Aham Talks is striving to bring forth. So I welcome you on the call, and we will start with you taking about 40 minutes, Chandrachud ji, to speak, after which we will have a Q&A. So whenever you're ready, you can let us know. We will open up the session for question and answers.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
All yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Monica ji. Hello everyone. Good evening. A very good evening. Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk to my friends. I see a lot of my known friends on this conference, and a lot of new people with whom I will make acquaintance. I wish this could be done being physically present there in Hyderabad, which in joke I called my city-in-law, because I'm married to a Telugu family, although I'm a Bengali. And just as a trivia, let me tell you one fun fact which you might not be aware, those who belong to Andhra Pradesh, is that the East India Company's decision to come into Bengal was taken in a city which is in Andhra Pradesh. It was taken in Bandar. That's where the East India Company decided that they should come into Bengal. So that's a very unique connection with between Bengal and Andhra Pradesh. But okay, coming to the topic, what happened to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is a question which has really puzzled, plagued the country like none other since 1945. Now, that has been more than nearly 75 years now. So, there have been many theories about what happened to him. Very few people, in fact, believed in his death. An overwhelming majority never believed that he died in that plane crash. And a huge number of theories have come up as to what could have happened to him. In fact, I mean, I might safely say that if one studies those theories, those ideas that were floated at different points of time, right from 1945, September, end of August, till today, that would be a brilliant study on mass psychology, on how people react to something they can relate to. Am I audible to everybody? I just wanted to confirm. So,
yes.
Okay. So it's that itself is a study in mass psychology as how people react to something traumatic related to someone very they're very passionate about. They can emotionally connect with, and people of India, people of this country, connected to Netaji. They connect to him as much today, 75 years after he disappeared, as they did in 1945, and that is by itself a unique phenomenon. despite the successive government's apathy towards him, despite confining him into a few lines in our official history books, textbooks, people have carried him in their hearts. So the question as to what happened to him has not yet been resolved officially, although the government's stand for the last 75 years has been that in 1945. Now, when we sift through all these theories, the like scores of theories, some said that he was brought back to India and shot dead in the Red Fort. Some said that he was eliminated by the Japanese. Some said that he was taken to China and killed there. Some said that he had become a hermit and lived somewhere in Bihar or Bengal. And some said he lived in the Northeast Indian region. So there were many of these theories. Some said he lived as a hermit in Madhya Pradesh. So most of these theories, of course, focused on a fact, were bent towards the fact that he became a sadhu, a hermit, a renunciate, and never came back to public life. But if we sift through the evidence, through all these, we get basically three theories which stand the scrutiny, which actually are based on some sort of evidence, some sort of facts. And these are the story. The first, number one, is the story of the plane crash, his death in plane crash. The second story is that he actually went to Russia. And the third story is that he came back to India. Now, if we look at these three stories, as I said, these stand the scrutiny when we look at the evidence. Now, a lot of people you will have come across who are very passionate about the issue, who like to state forward their opinion. But what we as a team always believe is that opinion and evidence are two different things. We might like to believe something, but that our liking to believe that does not make it the truth. To find the truth, we really have to be dispassionate. We really have to look extremely critically, ruthlessly at the evidence available and then reach a conclusion. And that is what me and my friends, Anuj, Srijit Panikkar, Shantan Dasgupta, Vishal Sharma, and many others who have joined Mission Netaji later on, we have been doing. We have collected the evidence. And then how we collected the evidence, I will come back to it a bit later in the talk. And but these are the three main scenarios that we have come to. Now, let us very quickly look at the evidence, what we have. What are the evidences for each of these three scenarios? The plane crash theory stands on the eyewitness account of a few Japanese soldiers, but primarily on the basis of the testimony given by Habibur Rahman, Netaji's aide de camp and right-hand man, who was allegedly Netaji's companion in that fateful flight. And he was rigorously interrogated by the British intelligence. And very early on, the British intelligence, I wish I could show you the documents, and I hope someday soon I will be able to stand in front of you and take you through all these documents in the presentation. They found very early on that Habibur Rahman was dithering, he was concealing facts, and he was lying. And that is what they noted very, very clearly in their statements. Now, when all these evidences were collected, there was no conclusive evidence. Nobody could gather any conclusive evidence. And when, even in the 60s, when the Americans were trying to find out some conclusive evidence about his plane crash, the conclusion that came out from their assessment of the evidence is that there is no direct evidence that proves his death. And at the same time, there is no direct evidence that proves that he was alive. Now, that was also the stand of our first Prime Minister. In 1962, most probably, after the first inquiry commission, the inquiry committee set up by Jawaharlal Nehru had given its report and was accepted by the government that Netaji had died in 1945 in the plane crash. Netaji's elder brother, who was a part of that committee and had given a dissentient report, he wrote to Jawaharlal Nehru directly challenging him that if you're so sure of his death, give me the proof of his death. The three-man inquiry committee led by General Shahnawaz Khan, Major General Shahnawaz Khan, and a bureaucrat, a central government bureaucrat, and Netaji's elder brother, Suresh Chandra Bose. They had investigated from 1956, in 1956, the entire issue. And the two persons, Shahnawaz Khan and the other person, Mr. Moitru, they wrote the report, the majority report, that Netaji's death is confirmed. But Suresh Chandra Bose, Netaji's elder brother, concluded that there was no evidence and Netaji was most likely alive. So, I would emphasize for those who are listening to me for the first time or are getting initiated into this discourse, remember the name Suresh Chandra Bose, because that will come back repeatedly during the later course of discussion. Now, Suresh Chandra Bose asked Jawaharlal Nehru directly that if you're so sure, that give me the evidence. Now, Jawaharlal Nehru wrote back to him saying that I have no direct proof. I cannot give you any direct proof of Netaji's death. But the circumstantial evidence that have been presented to us by all the investigations conducted by the Allied forces, by the Allied intelligence, by our own investigation committee, that has convinced us that Bose is no more. Now, so the entire conclusion of the government, the first government of India and the first prime minister, was based on circumstantial evidence. And it has not changed. So on many things, we see that the tradition that was started by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru has continued till today. I mean, the line that he laid down for bureaucrats, they have followed it blindly. And when we looked at the files related to Netaji, we saw that, I mean, decade after decade, bureaucrats copied and pasted. Literally, I mean, there was no copy paste, but at that time, but they just copied the previous regime's paragraphs, language, tone, everything. The argument was the same. Now, this was the basis on which the first government of India accepted that as circumstantial evidence. Now, when we come to the second theory, that Netaji somehow escaped to Russia, he was imprisoned there, tortured and killed. We find, when we look at the evidence, there is no tenable evidence. There is no evidence even of the sort of the plane crash. I mean, if the plane crash story, the theory at least has some circumstantial evidence, but the Russian theory has no such evidence. It has some stories, unverified, unverifiable, given out by a lot of people. For example, I can tell you that, and probably many of you already know that Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, General G.D. Bakshi, they are strong advocates of this line of argument that Netaji was eliminated in Russia. But the fact is, Dr. Swamy, and we actually pointed it out to him, Dr. Swamy bases his conclusion on the basis of a testimony of a stenographer who deposed in front of the second commission of inquiry that was investigating Netaji's death, the G.D. Khosla Commission, which functioned from 1970 to 1974. Now, in front of G.D. Khosla Commission, there was this person called Shyamlal Jain, who came and testified that one day he was called by Jawaharlal Nehru to type out a letter, and that letter was written by Nehru to Attlee, telling him that the Russians have betrayed their trust and have let Netaji into Russia, and Attlee should take appropriate action. Now, that is the evidence that Dr. Swamy likes to present everywhere. Well, the thing is that there are two problems with this evidence, and since there is no way to, show you all the documents, I will be just direct about it. The evidence of Shyamlal Jain has two main problems. The first problem is that there was no way to verify Jain's claim. There was no independent corroboration. If indeed Jawaharlal Nehru wrote a letter to Attlee, it has never been declassified. Whereas the British government claims that they have declassified every document that is related to Netaji. And there is no other copy that has ever been available. And the second problem, which is a bigger problem, which Dr. Swami does not really talk about, is that the same person, Shyamlal Jain, in the same time when he was deposing to Khosla, after telling Khosla that Nehru had sent this letter to Attlee, told him that Netaji was alive and was in India, and that Shyamlal Jain himself had met him. So if we have to believe Shyamlal Jain's testimony, we have to accept both his versions. Maybe if you say Shyamlal Jain was right, if he was correct, he was telling the truth, then maybe Nehru wrote the letter to Attlee and telling him that Netaji had gone into Russia. But that also then means that Netaji was not eliminated, as Dr. Swami and General Bakshi likes to claim, but that he returned to India and was there, because the same person claimed that he had met Netaji in 1967. So that is the Russian theory. Now, the Indian government has repeatedly asked the Russian government for their cooperation to release all their documents and to tell our government, tell our people the truth regarding Netaji's fate, everything that they have, everything that they know. And the Russian government has repeatedly denied having any information, having any knowledge of Subhash Chandra Bose's presence in Russia, about his fate in Russia. They have repeatedly said that we have no information whatsoever regarding Netaji's fate. Now, you have to remember a few things when we are talking about this diplomatic exchange. The first is you have to look at a case which pertains to a Swedish diplomat, Raoul Wallenberg. Raoul Wallenberg was taken in by the Red Army and apparently was killed. He was shot dead. But the Russian government kept denying the fact that he was taken in by the Red Army and that he was ever in Russia. It was after many years of persistent effort by the Swedish government, by the family of Raoul Wallenberg, who were very influential, and after a massive effort, that the truth finally came out. And that's not also the full truth, but the truth at least came out that Wallenberg was taken into Russia in captivity. So that's the history that Russia has. I mean, we have examples like that. We have examples of Indian revolutionaries who had gone to Russia and were later eliminated. And the information about their fate came out many decades later. So there has been a history, there is a history of suppressing information in that country. And here, maybe they have their reason for not telling the truth. And we may know the truth someday. But there is a bigger problem. The bigger problem is that we are asking the Russians to divulge information on Netaji from a very weak moral ground. The weak moral ground is because of the fact that our own country has not declassified all information, all files related to Netaji. So when we ourselves have taken a public position for 70 years that the man died, the man was dead in 1945, it somewhat becomes farcical to ask another country that we believe that the man was dead in 1945, but if you happen to have any information after 1945 about him, please do let us know. That statement sounds extremely farcical. And secondly, if you tell that, we have files about this person, but we will not open them up, we will not declassify them, we will not bring it out in the public, but you must. You are another country, you are a different country, so you must do it, but we will not do it. So that is very hypocritical. And naturally, if you and I can understand the predicament, the Russians will very well do that. They will never divulge any information unless we ourselves clean our house, unless we ourselves come clean. This current government, unfortunately, has been repeating the statement time and again, even that has been done on the floor of the parliament, that all files related to Netaji have been declassified. But unfortunately, that is not the truth. And in Conundrum, in our book, we have demonstrated how that is not the truth. I will come back to it if time permits, if there's a chance later during the discourse. But that is definitely not the truth. There are many, many more files these are basically intelligence files belonging to maybe to the IB, maybe to the RAW, certainly the crime branches of the state governments, CID files. There are many, many files we can confidently say that have not seen the day of light. And unless they are all put out in the open, officially, we will not know the truth, exactly what the government's version is. Now, why the government is doing is a matter for speculation, is a matter for discussion, and we can continue to debate that. But I will come back to the main story. Now, while all this was, as I told you about the story about the two inquiry committees, the Shahnawaz Committee and the Khosla Commission, the GD Khosla Commission, which functioned from 70 to 74. Now, after all this had happened, in the 90s, there was a talk of awarding a posthumous Bharat Ratna on Netaji, and then there was a talk of bringing back his ashes from Renkoji, where his alleged ashes have been kept there, preserved there since 1945. So, when the government announced its intention and some of top-ranking ministers started discussing the possibility of bringing back his ashes, a public interest litigation was filed in the Calcutta High Court, which challenged the government, which asked the court to stop the government because there was no evidence, conclusive evidence about Netaji's death, the way the government was presenting it. So the Calcutta High Court listened to them and asked the central government to set up another commission of inquiry to look into the issue. Now, the funny part is, although the government had maintained its stand, the government's counsel who argued in the court, he took the position on behalf of the government that there were big loopholes in the reports of the Shahnawaz Committee and the Khosla Commission. And that in view of those loopholes, their findings cannot be acceptable. And the same thing had been told by Prime Minister Morarji Desai on the floor of Parliament in 1978, saying that new information has come to light. The government is in receipt of new information, which raises severe questions on the findings of the Khosla Commission and the Shahnawaz Committee. So 20 years apart, from 1978 to 1998, in 1998, the court ordered setting up the new commission of inquiry. And as a result, the Justice Mukherjee Commission of Inquiry, led by Justice Manoj Kumar Mukherjee, a former Supreme Court judge, Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court, and a very, very well-known and highly regarded and respected judge, was appointed for the commission as the head of the commission. He conducted an inquiry and investigation through 6 years and submitted his report in 2006. And his conclusion, after going through all the evidence, was that there was no plane crash on 18th August 1945, as has been claimed by the government or has been claimed by the Japanese, and that the ashes which were preserved in Renkoji temple were not Netaji's. These were his conclusions. He was also asked by the government to state that if he did not, what happened to Netaji if he did not die in that plane crash. For various reasons, he could not reach a conclusion. He did not have enough time. It might sound 5 years, 6 years might sound a lot of time. But when you are digging into history, when you are digging into events that relate to 60, 70 years ago, that's not too much. And especially when you are working with a government that is hostile. Justice Mukherjee wrote in his report how the government at that time did not cooperate with him, did not cooperate in providing files to him, did not cooperate in providing information to him. And so he was practically engaged by a government, and he continued to work in an environment that remained hostile. So Justice Mukherjee's conclusions were brushed aside. the UP government had just had come to power in 2004, Home Minister Shivraj Patil rejected the findings of the report, and without ascribing any reason why the government rejected the report in that action taken report. Because the rule is, when a commission of inquiry's report is tabled in Parliament, it has to come with an action taken report as to what the government has done on the recommendations of the report. So the government, the UP government at the time, just clearly said that we don't agree with the findings of the report. We only agree with the part of the commission's findings that that Subhash Chandra Bose is no more, he is dead. Because Justice Mukherjee had said, had taken a calculated assumption that even if he did not die in 1945, by now he must be dead, because he would be he would be very advanced in his years, and like over 100 years of age. So it's very, very likely that he is not alive anymore. The government accepted that finding only, but rejected that commission's finding that Netaji had not died in that plane crash in 1945. In fact, that there was no plane crash at all. So this is when the case was almost finished. The government had rejected the report, rejected the commission's findings. It was not talking about the case anymore. And after 3 commissions of inquiry, it seemed like the end of the road.